Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Word on the Snake Vine. I'm your host Ross Deacon, and on this podcast we talk all things about venomous animal related, from venom research, venomous animal husbandry, animal conservation, herping, and of course snakebite and snakebite initiatives from all around the world. On this episode, I have joining me as my co-host.
Hi, I'm Denny.
Hey, I'm Squirl.
Hi, I'm Edd, and before we start, I have to do a few formalities. Views expressed in this episode are the views of the guest host, not for the facility or the company they work for.
So today we have such an amazing guest joining us. We have Romulus Whitaker. How are you today, Rom?
Just fine. Good to be here.
Good. Thank you very much for coming on to the show and talking to us today. I think most of our listeners will know who you are and will be really excited to hear what you've got to say about your work that you're doing in India and around snakebite and also conservation and taxonomy as well. So I think we'll go straight onto it, and I think we'll kind of start from the very start, if that's okay. So kind of how did you get into reptiles, and then how did you kind of, with being from America, how did you fall in love with India and make that move over to India?
Okay, that's a 3-hour discussion right there. But anyway, I'll try to keep it short. I was born in New York City, which is a bit unlikely place for a budding herpetologist to be born. But luckily, I lived up in northern New York State with my single mother and my sister for some time, for some years. And I've caught garter snakes and milk snakes and other non-venomous species when I was 4 or 5 years old. So that was a pretty good start. The great thing was that I had a mother who encouraged me. When we moved to India, when she married Rama Chattopadhyay, and we moved to India in 1951, I was just 7 years old, and I think my mother probably thought twice about that. We're moving to the land of cobras, and here's this little creature interested in snakes. So, luckily I made it through my first years here in India without getting nailed by anything venomous. But it was, as you can imagine, a very exciting time for a 7-year-old growing up here. And I spent my entire school years here in India, finished high school in South India. And at that point, everyone who finishes high school is supposed to go on to do something serious like college. So sure enough, I entered a college in America, and I made it through an entire year. I would say lucked out by getting through an entire year, because education and me just didn't fit very well. And I had also learned about a fantastic place called the Miami Serpentarium, which was owned and operated by the person I call my guru, William Haast. And I went down to Florida, and I landed a job with him and spent 2 years working learning from the master, and basically getting all the kind of equipment or knowledge needed to start my own snake park when I came back to India. So that's kind of a preview of what happened while I was in America. I came back to India in 1967 after serving a hitch in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam conflict. Luckily, they sent me only to Japan. I didn't get into the fighting part of the war. And when I came back to India, the first thing I did was set up a small venom production center, and I was supplying venom for anti-venom production and for cancer research. But I really had this goal of setting up a snake park that people could come to and learn about snakes. So I came down to Tamil Nadu, down here, the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu, where I had really grown up, where I had gone to school, so I knew the local language. And I sort of, with my family and friends, put together a little bit of money, rented a piece of land, and basically set up India's first snake park. I'm putting it very briefly now. It was a bit of a struggle, as you can imagine. And the thing is, the land that I set it up on was well outside the city, so the rent was cheap. But it wasn't getting as many visitors as I would have liked. And suddenly the local chief conservator of forest, the head of the forest department, came around and said, "Look, this looks like a pretty popular thing. Why don't you shift it to the Gindi Deer Park, which is right in the middle of Madras, which is now Chennai city?" And I just couldn't believe my ears. So that's the move that I made, and set up the snake park inside the city And within the first year, we had 1 million people coming through there already. And it just was overwhelming. And I knew that people's reactions to snakes almost all over the world were, and still are to a great degree, negative. But people are always very, very interested in snakes. And that's what was really proven to me by this 1 million people coming in the first year.
Definitely in a country like India where there's so much fear around them and stuff as well, because of the potential that they have. And I think that would have been really quite a thing when they say 1 million people in a year in the 60s is relatively high numbers of people. Even today, I suppose it's relatively high.
Yeah.
So that would have been pretty mental. So was that so that was the Chennai snake farm that was set up, and I know you had quite a bit to do with getting local people involved with that as well, and local tribes involved with the milking and such forth of snakes and the catching of snakes with that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, probably one of the main reasons for my decision to set something up down here in South India was meeting the Irula people. The Irula tribals were at that time the main snakeskin suppliers for a vast snakeskin industry, which they estimated. There were estimates that as many as 10 million snakeskins were being exported every year from India. It was kind of an out-of-control operation, and there was no regard to sex or size or age of a species or anything like this. It was just an uncontrolled skin industry. And with a lot of effort, there were a lot of people, animal rights activists and others, who got the industry closed down. The thing is, these expert snake hunters were then basically without a living. And it was then we hatched this idea to set up their own Irula Snake Catchers Cooperative, which meant collecting snakes, extracting the venom for production of anti-venom, and then releasing the snakes back to the wild. This was back in 1978 when we started it, and it's still going strong. It's now the major supplier of venom for the production of millions of vials of anti-venom every year. So it did make a lot of sense, and there are a lot of Irula tribals still able to make their living on their traditional skill. They're incredible people. I can't say enough to praise them for their skills in finding snakes.
With the tribe, with those people, effectively, are they brought up with that kind of learning the different skills that they use for snake catching and snake finding?
Yeah, there are several groups in India who are famous snake catchers, and I've met most of them, or at least some, in the different parts of the country. But the Irulas are very special. They are extremely meticulous in finding out the habits of snakes, learning the habits of snakes, and finding out where they live and what they do, and able to just find a piece of shedded skin or a little bit of a track in the sand or a piece of a scat of a snake and be able to identify it and tell you whether it's fresh and whether the snake is still around, and then go ahead and dig out a rat hole or a termite mound and pull out a nice 5 or 6 foot long cobra. It's almost like looking at magic the way they're able to find snakes. They're quite incredible.
That's pretty. To see. That would be, especially tracking any animal is hard, but tracking a snake even harder.
I used to sort of boast for them or about them that you have these guys following tiger spores and rhino spores and elephants and stuff like that. But how about finding a snake? I mean, how many blades of grass does a snake break before you can find out where it's gone? So, yeah, they're pretty uncanny.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So, how did you go from having the Chennai Snake Park to obviously opening Madras Crocodile Bank?
Well, it was kind of an automatic, or in a way, a necessary thing, because that was the time when I was also doing some of the first crocodile surveys around the country. Conservation was just coming into its own in the late 60s and early 70s, and it was getting quite a bit of hype in India, but there were no real field researchers, or very, very few at that time. So I spearheaded a couple of surveys in North India, crocodile surveys, with a couple of young colleagues of mine who should have probably continued studying in the various engineering colleges that they left and joined me, much to their parents' chagrin. But we did some of these crocodile surveys and found that the 3 Indian species, the marsh crocodile and the saltwater crocodile and the gharial, were virtually on the edge of extinction, and something had to be done about it. Well, we got a few crocodiles at the croc bank, and lo and behold, in the first year, the pair of mugger that we had started laying eggs. And they were in an enclosure about half the size of our kitchen, for example, at home. It was just a tiny enclosure, and here are these 2 crocodiles laying eggs and breeding successfully. So we realized we had something going here. My former wife, Zai, and I looked for land outside of the city of Chennai, south of Chennai, and found a piece of land cheap enough that we could afford it. It's right on the seacoast, right on the Bay of Bengal. And all you have to do is dig a hole and you get fresh water. So it was the ideal spot to, make some ponds for crocodiles. We didn't realize then how big it was going to be. It was just a couple of acres of land then. But it grew and grew as we got help from the World Wildlife Fund and from other donor agencies, and finally bought 9 acres of land and set up enclosures, starting with just 14 crocodiles and ending up today with about 2,400 of them. So, yeah, exactly. Don't say that they don't breed like rabbits. We had no idea how successful this is going to be. Talk about embarrassing, But, in fact, I'm here since I'm speaking on radio, since I'm speaking to the world right here, right now. We're offering 1,000 crocodiles to anyone who'll take them, free of charge. So step right up, folks.
1,000 crocodiles.
I'll have them.
That's a lot of crocodiles that you need to move on. Are they across? I assume now that they're across different species.
Yeah, we've got 17 different species out of the total of 23 or 25, however many the taxonomists want to tell us there are now. And my son Nikhil, who's the curator there, is keen on getting all the species of crocodiles in the world there. And I say, yeah, but you're going to run out of space, boy. So,
especially with 2,000 of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, because obviously that moves on to kind of you doing some quite good work with the Gharial there and stuff, which is obviously very, very endangered. And I think the numbers are they still declining in India?
No, the Gharial is doing a lot better than it did even 10 years ago. In fact, when I said that all 3 species of crocodilians were endangered, it's the Gharial who was really critical, and we probably estimated that there were less than 200 Gharial left at that time, I think in the mid-70s. And since then, the government of India, along with us, along with several other zoos, started hatching eggs collected in the wild and breeding them in captivity and rearing the babies up to a certain size, up to about 1 meter long, about 3 feet long, and then releasing them back to the wild, the Head Start program, which was amazingly successful for all 3 species, actually. And now there are several thousand Gharial, mostly on the Chambal River in northern India, divided between 3 states of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh. And this stretch of river has been declared a sanctuary. It's a very unique sanctuary because it's 428 kilometers long. It's about 350 miles long and just a kilometer wide, less than a mile wide. So it's one of the strangest shaped wildlife national sanctuaries in the world, just along this river. But it's been absolutely essential for the Gharial because elsewhere, other Indian rivers you may have heard about have been polluted beyond belief. You cannot believe that the sacred rivers of the Ganges and the Yamuna are as filthy as they are. It's just horrendous and doesn't look like any end in sight because the garbage and the pollution just keeps building up. But the Chambal River is, this is a kind of an irony really, because the Chambal River is not one of the holy rivers, and that's why it's clean.
The cleanest.
Yeah. Anyway.
So
the Gharial. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, carry on. Sorry, I was going to chime in, but please carry on.
No, well, the Gharial's doing well there. Right now, a colleague of ours by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Lang, one of the world's top croc biologists, has been doing a study for close to 12 years now, doing a radiotelemetry study with up to 50 animals with radios on them, some of them with satellite radios on them, and looking at finding out for the very first time what the behavior and the occupation of the river these crocodiles really have. There's almost nothing known about them to begin with, and now over this last 10 or 12 years, we're finding out all sorts of things. For example, one female gharial does a regular pilgrimage of over 200 kilometers up and down the river every year after nesting. And so it just seems that this is one animal, a real river crocodile, which it has to have big stretches of river to survive. And this is really an important issue now because all sorts of dams and barrages and everything else are planned for these various rivers in India, and even an interlinking scheme which could really mess things up for the gharial and for a lot of other animals, of course.
And within India, I do know that a lot of wildlife is quite heavily protected within India as well. So it's kind of seems that would be an odd thing for them to go down that path with all the protection that they're trying to impart on their wildlife.
Yeah, well, you've got that versus the fact that we've got a growing population of 1.2 billion people, and the resources and for fresh water, for example, the need for fresh water is not going to diminish. It's only increasing. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the future for a lot of these animals. But let's remember the tolerance of people in India and the fact that we still have all the major predators that we ever had, except the cheetah. The Indian cheetah is gone. But everything else is here, and in fair numbers. You hear people talking about the fact that there are as many as 15 to 20,000 leopards in India. There are several thousand tigers left. It's the major population of tigers left in the country. So it's not as bad as it sounds sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of brings us on to maybe something that I think most of our listeners will know you're quite famed for. One particular snake in India, that obviously being the king cobra. So kind of how did the fascination start with the king cobra, and kind of how did you end up doing all the work that you have done with them?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that anyone who likes snakes has to like the super snake. I mean, it's just such an impressive animal, and the more you learn about it, the more we're with them, the more we're learning about them, the more impressive they get. They're never boring, that's for sure.
So, obviously, I know you probably... Well, this episode will be going out just before Gowrie speaks at the Herp Symposium. So, obviously, I know you're probably not allowed to tell us, but there is obviously a taxonomic reform coming for the species as well, which you've been involved in, I believe.
Yeah, this has been something we've observed all the time I've worked with king cobras, and luckily having been able to work as in other countries, in Malaysia and Indonesia, and it's just so obvious that there are several different species of king cobras just by looking at them visually as well as their behavior. But now, of course, it's the time for the microscientists and the DNA people to get in there and really tell us for sure which species is which. And that's happening, and I'm sure Gowrie will be elucidating some of it. We keep bugging him and keep saying, come on, tell us how many species we got. He says, this work is taking time, and so I don't know much about all that stuff, but I do know that they're different species. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, so I think that'll be quite interesting. Quite an interesting talk to listen to over next weekend. I'm particularly looking forward to that one. But, so kind of with the Madras Crocodile Park, obviously it's grown in size over the years. Is there any kind of more plans on exactly what's going to happen there, and kind of, or?
Well, yeah, the latest sort of, not latest. We've been working at it for some time. is to revamp the Madras Crocodile Bank with a new master plan, which has been approved by the authority in India, the government authority that guides zoos. It's called the Central Zoo Authority. So we've got this very ambitious program to make this a much, much more spectacular exhibit in terms of having a lot more underwater exhibits, waterfalls, water circulation. There's a lot of things that need great improvement, but also to attract more people and especially kids, getting them to appreciate and learn about reptiles through some pretty spectacular exhibits. So I've had the luck and the fortune of being invited to various zoos and crocodile facilities around the world, and taking pictures and meeting with people who are my colleagues now. So we've got help from a lot of people around the world to help make us this a really spectacular crocodile exhibit.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think it's already quite spectacular with 2,000 odd individuals there. I think it obviously getting the funding to be able to improve the facilities and such forth will just increase the desirability of the park.
Sure. Well, what's nice is that people around here consider it part of their history growing up too. Sometimes I meet some of these guys who are CEOs of big corporate operations saying, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to come to the Croc Bank. And I say, come on, man, I'm not that old. But it is nice to know that there is some history there and that people really appreciate it, the fact that they grew up and had a wonderful place to go to see weird creatures like crocodiles and snakes and lizards and stuff like that.
I think it's good. It's good for local outreach, isn't it? Especially with all the negative aspects of reptiles in the country. It's great to have that outreach program for people to come and see. So something else that you've kind of with the Madras Crocodile Bank, you open the Agumbe, I can't say the word now, Agumbe research station as well.
Yeah, I can give you a bit of history there. I went to Agumbe. Sounds like an African name, doesn't it? Agumbe.
Yes. That's why I was confusing myself there. I was reading it and thinking, well, it sounds African, but I know it's in South India, so...
It is. Yeah, it's on the south. It's just absolutely directly across the coast from where I'm sitting right now. I'm sitting on the southeast coast near Chennai, and that place is directly across the peninsula of India, very near a city on the coast there called Mangalore. It's inland from Mangalore in the Western Ghats. Western Ghats are this chain of hills that run all along the western coast of India, sometimes some of the hills going up to 9,000 feet, so some of them are pretty high. But the main feature about those hills is that they trap the rain from the southwest monsoon, and the rainfall is sometimes pretty staggering. In Agumbe, we've had as much as 30 feet, as much as 10 meters of rain in one monsoon, which is between June and September, and that is a lot of water. So, yeah, I went there in 1970-71 when I was told that that's the place to go to see king cobras. I had met a novelist who wrote about, well, he was a white hunter, so to speak, in those days, who went out, and he was kind of like Jim Corbett in the sense that he would go after man-eating tigers and rogue elephants and stuff like that. And I met him. He was quite a character by the name of Kenneth Anderson. And he said, if you want to see a king cobra, go to Agumbe. So I was on the next bus to Agumbe, basically, because I had basically just opened the snake park, and we very much needed a king cobra.
Of course.
I had been, I grew up in the hills in the Western Ghats, so I'd been looking in the forest probably most of my life in the hopes of seeing a king cobra, and I never did. I arrived at Agumbe, attired in my typical snake hunting gear, which was then a loincloth with a hornbill feather in my scraggly hair, and wandered into the forest. Yeah, it was quite a sight. And, within 2 or 3 hours of walking into that forest, I saw this black tail disappearing into the bushes, and I thought, wow, big rat snake, because the rat snake, the Chais mucosa, there is very black. So being a typical snake hunter, I leaped on it the way you do. I mean, come on, everyone knows that. Grabbed its tail, And suddenly this hood is raised up over me, looking down at this puny human lying there. And I realized, shucks, I just found my first king cobra, or as he found me.
Yeah.
So I let go of the tail and then realized, wait a minute, I can't let it go. And it luckily went into a pile of leaves and just to hide itself. And I, by that time, got myself together and my heart slowed down enough that I could think a little bit and grabbed a stick and poked around and got the snake to come out. Well, the rest of the story is how I got it into a sleeping bag because I didn't have a snake bag big enough for a 10-foot king cobra. And I still am not quite sure how I managed to do it without getting nailed, but I did get the snake to see this sleeping bag, which I had propped open with a couple of sticks, and obviously it looked like a nice hiding place for it to get away from this crazy idiot with the hornbill feather in his hair. And sure enough, it slipped straight into the bag, and I had my first king cobra. So that was, wow. I sort of felt, yeah, and I sort of felt like that Maasai warrior who kills his first lion or something like that when he's a teenager.
Yeah. I bet getting it out the bag on the other side was rather fun.
Oh yeah, of course.
I can't imagine a 10-foot king enjoying being in after that ordeal, enjoying being in a sleeping bag for long.
No. Well, we got him back to the. Interestingly, within 24 hours, I had found another one in this, not far away from there. By that time, I had myself rigged a nice bag and a bagger, sort of very crude bagger, almost like the frame of a butterfly net, so that I could easily bag a snake, and got them back to the snake park as fast as I could. So it was quite an achievement, and I was just so excited.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think most of us, if that was our first wild king cobra story, we would be pretty happy with just seeing one in the wild, let alone anything else. It's one of my things when I go to India next year. Is I want to spend some hopefully
I'm excited
see some
just
wild.
listening to it.
Yeah, no, Agumbe is a wonderful place in many ways, and I was always attracted back to it, not only just for king cobras, but there's, being a high rainfall part of the Western Ghats, there are incredible numbers of frogs, pit vipers, and other ones. And right now, just as an example, there's a black leopard who uses our research station as part of his home range. So he's seen occasionally. He's very shy, but we've got some beautiful camera trap images and videos of him walking by. So that's pretty exciting.
That's pretty cool.
So the whole point of going to Agumbe, I realized that, look, we're going to have to learn about the king cobra, and the only way to do it is to set up some sort of a little base, because working in the rainforest, especially in the monsoon, is really tough. You've got thousands of leeches. You've got no dry clothes to wear. Even your food is always soggy. So basically, that was what I wanted to do. In 2004 and 2005 is when we found this piece of land there and were able to buy it and set up the small research station. It was just very nondescript at first. And then I applied to something called the Whitley Fund for Nature and gave my idea that I was going to set up this research station in the rainforest. And sure enough, they gave me this magnificent grant, and it was a pretty exciting time. And if you come there now, it looks like it's been around. It's all the way since 2005, so it's a really well-established research station with lots of people coming and working there. It's great.
So as part of your work with that and around the kings, and obviously you say that there's definitely kind of few different species that will come about from this reclassification.
Yeah.
And I know you're kind of involved with the IUCN quite a bit. Do you kind of anticipate that there will be any of the new species that go from vulnerable to kind of a higher level on the red list?
It's very likely. I honestly don't know enough about the this, the present populations of some of the more obscure populations of king cobras. There are parts of India, for example, there's something called the Eastern Ghats on the eastern side of India, not just north of where I am now. And there is a small population of king cobras which look very different from our Western Ghats king cobras. I'd bet money on the fact that that's another species, and it's under incredible pressure because people are scared, really scared of it, and it's always killed on sight, and they haven't got the same sort of easygoing attitude as the people around Agumbe who worship king cobras to begin with. And then they know that they can call any of us up, and within an hour or so we'll get there. If there's a king cobra in their house, we'll gently remove it and put it outside. So there's a much greater tolerance over there for king cobras. And in fact, we just recently made a video. You can contact me and I can give you a link to it, actually about teaching people to live with king cobras. And it was recorded in the language of the people that live near us, Kannada, and now it's been dubbed into Telugu so that the farmers on that side of India will see, wow, the farmers over there in the Western Ghats in Agumbe are okay with king cobras, we can be too. And this is what we're trying to do, basically.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's easy for us to say stuff like that. I love king cobras, so you must love them too. The average farmer is going to say, you crazy boy. So,
I mean, they do face a lot of just snakes in general do face a lot of persecution from agricultural pressures, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. But let's remember also that the reason why there are so many snakes here is because of agriculture. Because the rats and toads and frogs are absolutely overjoyed at rice fields, for example. And that's where the maximum number of snakes can be found.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So, with the king cobra and kind of, is that more persecuted due to the fact of its size and such forth? People are just generally more scared of it.
Yeah.
Because by numbers seem to be relatively low from all accounts from those species.
Absolutely. No, I think one of the most interesting stories I heard recently from colleagues of ours in Thailand who are working in northern Thailand, Colin Strine and his team over there at Sakura up in northern Thailand, they're doing king cobra telemetry as well over there. And they did a survey amongst school children, for example, and just asked a simple question: what's the most dangerous snake around, the one that causes bites and deaths? And it was almost like an 80, 90, or 100% thing that, yes, king cobra, that's the scary one, that's the most dangerous one. And then they did a survey in the clinics and hospitals, and they couldn't find a single case of king cobra bite. So there are plenty of cobras and plenty of vipers and pit vipers, and kraits, but no king cobra bites. So, I mean, we already knew that, but you have to do a survey like that to prove it, really. So,
yeah. I mean, that data is the key, isn't it?
More of a mythical thing.
Yeah. Well, king cobras are really intelligent, and they're really big, so they're conspicuous, but they're intelligent enough to keep away from humans. They seem to know how dangerous humans are. Whereas other snakes, vipers in particular, are a big problem because they seem to tend to feel that they're camouflaged and that'll get them by. So rather than shooting off, they'll very often coil up very tightly in leaves or sticks. And if someone puts their hand or their foot in there, they get nailed. And that's why vipers are such a serious problem in India, as far as snakebite is concerned.
Yeah, it's the same in Africa, though. The black mamba being the most feared snake in Africa, but bite rates aren't. It's just a big, intelligent snake that is quite scary.
Absolutely. Yep. Same thing.
Yeah, so I think that kind of leads us quite nicely on to some of the work that you're doing now with the Global Snakebite Initiative and kind of that. So kind of what are the big pressures in India regarding snakebite? Because obviously we know that we have the big species in India that are there, but there's obviously going to be some pressures that are causing those species to fight others than have more bites than other species.
This is like another thing, and I can give you a 6-hour lecture on if you're ready for it. But this is a complex thing, but it's so fascinating because it's it's ecology, it's sociology, it's health. I mean, there's just so much involved in this whole snakebite issue. Okay, long ago I coined this phrase called the Big Four dangerous snakes of India. It's not as though I coined the expression, but people had already recognized the fact that cobra, Russell's viper, crate, and saw-scale viper are the 4 most dangerous snakes in India. That is the 4 species causing most deaths. And that is why a polyvalent anti-venom has been made, actually since the early 1900s in India for these 4 species. The complicated part of it is that there are actually 4 species of cobras, and there are actually 8 species of kraits. There's 2 subspecies of saw-scale vipers, and as far as we know, only 1 species of Russells, but tremendous variation, geographic variation in their venoms. Now, this means that the antivenom made from these so-called Big Four is really not adequate enough. And this is probably one of the main problems that we have to overcome. And it's so complicated because just getting permits to collect venom is so difficult because it comes under a completely different ministry, and the Wildlife Protection Ministry is very, very tight about giving permits for this kind of thing. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is if you're bitten by a snake in a village, you would tend to go to the local healer. He's close by, he's cheap, and since snakebite is usually not fatal, chances are that local healer has many success stories that he can crow about, and it's not a matter of having to take a long trip to a hospital, even if you can get a vehicle. The guy will treat you right there, and just for $50 or whatever, nice cheap treatment. The only problem is if it's going to be a fatal bite, it will be fatal because these guys have all sorts of bogus remedies, which obviously don't work. So yeah, we're trying to tell people. I mean, our education program is more to do with prevention of snakebite because treating it is complicated. Getting to the hospital is complicated. Number one. Whether the antivenom is of a high enough titer, in other words, strong enough to neutralize the amount of venom that's been injected is questionable. And snakebite can lead to all sorts of complications. So it's really a question of trying to get people to be aware of how to live with snakes, how to avoid getting bitten. And for example, at night, sleeping on the ground is not a very wise idea, but if you're a poor farmer and you don't have a bed in the house anyway, and it's hot summer night, you're not going to sleep in that little hut. You're going to sleep outside. Okay, well, we're saying, well, rig up a mosquito net. I mean, it'll help protect you from malaria and dengue fever and snakebite and scorpion sting. So, and if you're working, if you're harvesting or planting, before you stick your hands into the bushes or anything, put a stick there first. And watch where you're walking. And perhaps most important of all, if you're walking out at night, which you often do either just to take a leak or to go and turn your farm pump on or something like that, use a light. Yeah. And this is like one of the things we stress again and again and again.
And I think yeah, it's definitely some of the same issues that obviously that others have spoke about in different episodes, but I think some of the social pressures in India, as you say, with going to the healers, and then the governmental hospitals aren't necessarily prepared correctly to take snakebite victims in India compared to the private hospitals with big antivenom stocks, and that means that the financial pressure of having to try and go to a hospital that can treat you correctly means that a lot of these people are scared because they're going to put themselves and their families into considerable debt. And it, like watching certain documentaries where they talk about actually it actually puts pressure on villages, because villages will help each other out because of the culture there, that being such a friendly based culture, that the village will help them out. So the village a lot of the village end up in debt for trying to save an integral member of their society. And I think it's definitely different in a lot of ways to a lot of other places in India. But then obviously there's certain things that are happening right now with Jos Luis and the Indian Snakebite initiative with their new mobile phone app, because India has got such a privilege of being so well connected in a lot of places.
That's true.
That using this new technology and this new app that could help you identify the snake you've been bitten by without having to kill it and risk another bite, or risk somebody else being bitten, and then that being able to tell you where your nearest hospital with anti-venom is and stuff like that. I think that's going to have a massive impact on India, the Indian situation.
No, very true. And getting all this information out is foremost in our minds. And I'm not sure if I've given you links, but I will send you links to the short little videos that we've produced. One is basically on how to identify snakes and how to avoid them. One is what to do in terms of first aid if you are bitten and what to do next. And the third one is the safe methods of rescuing a snake, because we've got this huge bunch of rescuers coming up, and some of them are real crazy. I'm sure if you look at Facebook, you'll see some amazingly stupid things that people do with snakes just to show off, just to get their picture.
Just for Facebook.
Oh man, that's why I don't do Facebook. It's really sick. No, the thing is, we're trying to tell people, and when we give these talks to rescuers, and they'll come around, and I've gained enough notoriety in India that people appreciate what I'm trying to tell them. And we basically, our message is, look, you like snakes, and invariably they say, yes, we love snakes. Okay, then respect them. Show some respect to the snake. And if you're going to handle him stupidly and teach some younger person to handle him even stupider, and you get bitten, or he gets bitten, or she gets bitten and gets injured or dies, you're not doing any favor to the snake at all. It's just one more way of people saying, yeah, I see how bad snakes are. Not how stupid the rescuer was, but how bad snakes are. So this message seems to get across to at least some of them. So things are getting better, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned Facebook there, and what we're seeing in a lot of the African snakebite fields and initiatives is the use of Facebook for identification and kind of establishing connections between local rescuers and knowledgeable people and the locals. Is that something that's been done in India as well?
To some extent, less than what I've heard from Africa. Yeah, it's true. But it is true. It's either that or Twitter, or of course WhatsApp is a very, very common use of WhatsApp amongst the snake rescuers, to the extent that I can't even have a WhatsApp account because I get inundated by all the rescuers. Hey man, they just caught this. Hey, look at this. Hey. Anyway, no, but you're right. The social media can be extremely helpful in this case, and that the phone app that Jos and his team have produced on Indian snakes is really helpful and is linked a lot to the other aspects of social media too. So it's very positive.
Yeah, it's definitely we were lucky enough as a group to get a password and username outside of India to be able to use it. So it was we've had a look, and we've advertised it on our social media, and genuinely it looks like it's going to be such a great resource to not only snakebite victims but to snake catchers as well, to be able to go and remove wildlife safely, protect it because it is protected wildlife safely, and re-release them in a safe location. So it's absolutely fantastic that the work that he's doing there, and obviously the work that is ongoing in India, I think is going to help relieve the pressures that are currently there. So you mentioned Chennai Snake Park is still heavily producing venom for anti-venom production and such forth. And
no, it's you got this is something different.
Okay.
The Irula Snake Catchers Cooperative was created by us back in '78, but it is its own entity, and it's actually registered under the Department of Industries and Commerce of the government of Tamil Nadu. So it's actually a quasi-government state-run cooperative society. We are advisors. I'm still so-called chief technical advisor and all, but we have a lot to do to improve them, and we're doing that with the help of Dr. David Williams, who's the CEO of the Global Snakebite Initiative and heads the Australian Venom Research Unit at the University of Melbourne. So everyone, including the anti-venom manufacturers who do tests on the venom they use, have said that the venom has to be improved if we are going to make a much better anti-venom. And we've got WHO guidelines now that say that wild snakes should no longer be used, that they should also be always, all the venom should be taken from captive snakes, captive bred snakes, so that there is a way of actually going back and finding out which snakes are producing which venoms, and also the use of venoms from snakes of different age groups and different sexes, for example, are very important because they do vary among age groups and besides geographic groups. So this is going to mean a lot of changes, and there are not going to be so many Irulas out there catching snakes anymore. We're looking at like many tribal arts, so to speak, are dying, and this is another thing that's going to go, because if they're going to be using captive bred snakes, all that snake catching is going to disappear. But this is good for snakes too.
Yeah, it is, but as you say, it's a shame that that snake catching is going to become a dying art. However, they will probably be involved in snake rescues and such forth still.
That's
of
true.
Local areas, so that some of those skills that they have will be able to be used within that field instead, which I think will be, again, it's just repurposing of their skill set rather than anything else, really. Which is really interesting. So with them having to kind of go that way and having to use captive bred animals, is that where you guys will come involved and help them to set up that so that they have the knowledge set to do so? Because
they don't really have the knowledge. They're not, in any sense of the word, they are tribal people, and the definition of this kind of tribal person is a hunter-gatherer who doesn't keep animals, who doesn't raise animals and breed them in captivity. So we are really looking probably to bring herpetoculturalists from abroad to help out. So we'll probably be looking for expertise from people who keep and breed large numbers of snakes in order to transfer the technology to the Irulas. This is all in the process of happening right now. This is all, again, through the government, and the government works very slowly. So this is our third year in trying to get this to happen. And it will happen, but it's just a little frustrating, the time that it takes.
And I think with the WHO guidelines and such forth will help push that, the move to that, which is great. And that's one thing that I think we've all seen recently with the WHO taking up the snake bite as a neglected tropical disease. We've seen this snowball effect of pace gathering with people getting involved in snakebite and kind of talking about it more and more.
I'm glad you're saying that from your perspective, because that's what I've been feeling over here as well. And we've got government people coming to us and asking advice finally. Instead of us going and badgering them to make them do something, they're actually coming to us. I said, okay, now things are getting positive.
That's progress.
Yeah,
I think at that point the battle is half won now that now governments are asking for help and support and for information. I think that's half the battle won, because if you look at other countries, they're still struggling majorly to get their health ministers and their government involved, which is such a shame. Really.
It is. Well, one thing that happened, you probably know, in 2011, a study called the Million Death Study came out of the University of Toronto and the Global Health Center, which I'm a co-author of the paper as the sort of token herpetologist, I guess you could say. Said, and it just turned things upside down in India. The official statistics for the year of the study from the government of India was 1,400 snakebite deaths, and the Million Death Study estimate was 46,000. Now, there's something wrong when the government can only report 1,400 and something deaths, when the actual fact, based on verbal autopsies in 1 million households, comes up to a figure like 46,000. And the new edition of this Million Death Study is coming up with even larger figures of closer to 60,000 people killed by snakebite every year in India. This is incredible, and it's something we had never realized, the kind of the size of this health problem. And we're not looking at the survivors, the snakebite survivors who are permanently injured or traumatized by snakebite. We're not even figuring those into this overall thing. And I think something close to 20% of the deaths are amongst children under the age of 15 years old. And a very high proportion of the people who die are the breadwinner of the family, who are the most active in agriculture and more likely to get bitten. So yeah, it's something so serious, and without this Million Death Study to sort of blow the whistle on it, we'd still be mired in this government statistics, which are absolutely rubbish.
Yeah.
I think that those numbers are just every time you hear them, they just sink home a little bit more. But to say that they're big, that we actually think that they are bigger than this new Million Death Studies, saying that they're bigger than what we originally thought is it's pretty insane. And I think because of the rural location and stuff of a lot of these deaths, I think that's probably why a lot of them are missed by the government and by these studies. I think I can remember somebody saying, I think it might have been James, that James Reed, that in Indian hospitals that the only reason they're saying that they're recording 1,500 deaths a year is because that's the number that go to governmental hospitals and not the private hospitals. So that they're struggling with data as a country. They're struggling to get data because the cooperation between the private sector and the public sector is still not there. So they're still struggling for that data. But, it's really quite a fascinating country as a whole, really. I think from a wildlife perspective and from a cultural and snakebite perspective as well, I think it's definitely a very interesting place. So with snakebite, are you seeing that you're getting more bites in certain areas within India, or is it still quite widespread? Because obviously you've got pretty much
the new version of this study, which will probably be out within the next month or so, indicates that there are about 28 different states in India, okay? And only 8 of the states account for 75 or 80% of the bites. And another interesting fact that came out in this more recent roundup of data is that it's all, the vast majority of the bites are below 400 meters elevation and in these 8 states, and primarily agricultural areas, and again, restricted to certain species, and almost, again, close to 80% of the bites happen during the summer monsoon. So you see all these, the concentrations of species, the places, and the season of the year is very definite, and this is very, very useful for our programs for so-called snakebite mitigation projects, and the education projects, and the supply of antivenom can be targeted to where it's really needed and when it's really needed. So this study is, I hope, going to wake up the government even more to do a lot that they have to do. It's not only government, of course. There's a lot of us, other non-government organizations and other people who are involved. The MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, people, the Doctors Without Borders, and other non-government organizations who are working in India who are very much part of the solution.
Do you, with the study and with the different states, do you notice any trends in kind of species being the primary kind of case for envenomations varying between states? Or is it kind of a skew towards a certain species across the board?
Oh, no, it's not. It's pretty complicated. And, okay, I'll just give you a quick example. Rajasthan, which is the desert state in northwest India, which borders Pakistan.
Yeah.
Almost 90% of the venomous snake bites there are from saw-scale vipers. Echis carinatus sokareki, the large subspecies of Indian saw-scale viper, which grows to close to, over 2 feet long, very double the size of the South Indian echis, which makes me suspect it's another species. But anyway, again, that's the taxonomist to figure it out. And then there are other areas of the country where Russell's viper is the primary biter in terms of dangerous bites. And overall, Russell's viper seems to be the #1 deadliest snake in India. I think the latest statistics show that that about 40% of fatal snake bites are from Russell's viper, about 10 to 15% by cobra, and maybe 5 to 10% by crates and saw-scale vipers, and then there's a good 25% or so which are unknown, species unknown. Right. So a lot more careful data collection will help solve this problem, but Russell's viper stands out as the #1 deadliest snake in India for sure.
Yeah.
I think that is, as you say, is primarily because of the agricultural aspect, and I think Russell's vipers are probably more likely to sit there and try and wait it out over an elapid's counterpart, really.
Very true.
Very true.
Yeah.
I do have an eye on the time, as this is a thing. We've been recording for 57 minutes, and that has gone by in an absolute blink of an eye.
True. Yeah, you're right.
So I'll put this out to the other hosts. Do either of you guys have any more questions?
Not that I can think of just off the top of my head. Too much pressure. Too much pressure.
Danny,
what is the kind of future plan for yourself? Are you focusing more on snakebite, or are you going to work more on conservation? Is there anything you're hoping to do?
Nice.
I think working on snakebite is like working on conservation too, isn't it? Because in fact, this is a sort of message out there. I continually tell people at every talk that I give and stuff. So you like snakes, huh? And people, how people like to say, yeah, we love snakes. All right, then do something about snakebite. So, and then of course the dialogue starts. What can we do to help out? And I think we're getting through to a lot of people. Well, the nice thing is getting through to corporate donors, for example. In India, we've got something called corporate social responsibility, wherein a company has to give up to 2% of its gross product to either conservation or to health or some, public, something good for the public. And this has allowed us to continue doing our education programs with support from various industries here. It's great because once they come on board, it's good publicity for them too. They're doing something great for health and great for the society. So they appreciate that as well. So yeah, I'm continuing doing this, and I think snakebite is. When I look at my history with snakebite, well, man, back in early 1970s, I was writing little pamphlets and stuff like that about how to avoid snakes and how to identify them. So it's been there all my life, and having experienced a few snake bites also kind of helped a lot too. Say, man, that hurts. That's really bad. And
you do realise you've opened yourself up for the question of which snakes have you been bitten
no,
by?
but I don't answer those questions. All I can say is that you get bitten by a snake, you're dumb, stupid, and clumsy. And I'm serious. If you're really careful with snakes, you won't get bit.
True story.
That's true. So, Danny, do you have any questions?
So many, but I just want to listen all day. I have nothing.
So that is an hour that we've been recording, and I'd just like to thank you for coming on, Roma.
Sure.
It's been absolutely incredible to listen to you and to interact with you and to get you on. And I think I can speak for all the hosts in saying this has probably been one of our favourite episodes to record, and definitely it's been quite hard for us all to as we were coming up to this, we all got rather excited with obviously with you being one of the legends of herpetology in the world and some of the incredible work that you've done and you continue to do. So thank you very much for agreeing to come onto the episode. It's been genuinely great to have you.
Thank you all. I'll continue to send you little links and stuff that we're doing so that you can keep up to date on too. So.
Please do. Because anything you send to...
Post them on the site, or can we use them on the site? Or for us?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
We will put them out for our audience to see and Excellent. For our audience to get involved in, because we're trying to build as much interest and sharing within snakebite and kind of conservation and venomous animals as we can as a podcast. So it's really good. So I now better do the formalities. So if you've really enjoyed this episode, please do like and share the episode so more people can hear it. Please do give us a 5-star review. If you would like to, obviously, please do review us. More reviews we get, more chance people will get to see the page, hear the episodes, and such forth. And also, please do like and share the Instagram and Facebook page. And also, please do go to wordonthesnakevine.co.uk to look at our past catalogue of episodes. And also, there is a link to some of our new merchandise on there. Please do remember, every single piece of profit that comes from the merchandise does go back into snakebite-based causes. We push back into snakebite and conservation. So please do get involved there. So just like to thank you all again for listening, and good night.